War is war and hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse.
How do you figure that, Hawkeye?
Easy, Father. Tell me, who goes to hell?
Well, sinners, I believe.
Exactly. There are no innocent bystanders in hell. But war is chock full of them. Little kids, cripples, old ladies. In fact, except for a few of the brass, almost everybody involved is an innocent bystander.
Hey, what's going on, guys? So, Denise Camp is a new writer in comics, and by that I mean he's been writing comics for a few years, but I just found out about him last year, so he's new to me. And Camp is one of those writers like Tom King, or Grant Morrison, Mark Miller, Garth Ennis, Scott Snyder, or Frank Miller, where you will either love them and love everything they've ever written, or you're going to think he's the biggest hack to ever shit his way across the page, and there's no in between. I find myself in the former category with Denise Camp so far, and much like a lot of other people, I think, discovered Denise Camp through The Ultimates. And from there, I just wanted to read more stuff from the guy, which brought me to 20th Century Men by Camp and artist Stephen Morian and letterer Aditya Bidikar. And I'm really resisting the impulse to say the obvious in calling it this decade's Watchmen, because I feel like Watchmen is such an overused comparison when describing deconstructionist superhero comics, and yes, I know I'm part of that problem, but in this case, I don't know what else to compare it to. This is an alternate history story about how superheroes reshaped the 20th century from World War II onward. So, it is a Watchmen story of sorts, which I guess is just the title of this video. 20th Century Men, a Watchmen story. Yeah, unless I come up with something better, that's just what I'm going to go with. So, 20th Century Men is a 6-issue miniseries that largely takes place in the late 1980s, and despite being an alternate history, a lot of key historical events still took place, just with superheroes. And that is superheroes with an asterisk. These aren't superheroes in the traditional Marvel, DC, Saturday morning cartoon kind of a way. These are superheroes in the same way that, like, Solid Snake or Raiden or any of the G.I. Joes are superheroes. These are extraordinary individuals who are more so extensions of their respective militaries and governments and are propaganda tools instead of culturally and economically edible champions of the oppressed. Now, like I said, despite this being an alternate history, events like the Vietnam War and the Soviet Union's invasion and occupation of Afghanistan still happened. In fact, those are the two major world events that this series revolves around, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. But much like Watchmen, this book is an ensemble piece. That said, one could argue that there is a singular main character, that being the Soviet military superhero, the Iron Star, aka Peter Platonov. But, I don't know, there's like 5 other characters in the book, and all of them are, at least in my opinion, equally as important to the story as the Iron Star. But of all the characters here, we spend the most time with him, so I consider him to be the main character. And he's a very tragic and interesting figure. Iron Star was a genius child prodigy who was ripped away from his mother's care to build weapons for the USSR. Well, kind of. He wasn't there specifically to build weapons. It's more like, this kid is a genius, and under a, supposedly, communist government, ideas are not private property. So you have a duty to share what you have with your countrymen. It just so happens that Peter was really fucking good at building weapons. And it's funny, in issue 1, the man who basically kidnapped Peter as a child scolds him for building the Iron Star power suit because it's a WMD and not some miracle machine to save lives, which is stupid, but not in a way where the book is stupid. Denise Camp and Stephen Morian are making a commentary on the paradoxical nature of the imperialist ideology and philosophy, you know, doing what you're doing with the intent to save lives, but slaughtering millions of people in order to do it. And the book's mirror to the Iron Star is actually the President of the United States, Thomas Goode. Now, President Goode is this book's universe's Captain America, which is really kind of cool, because in a way it sort of makes this whole thing another Captain America versus Iron Man story. But President Goode fought in World War II. He's part of that greatest generation. He's also a 4-term president or something insane like that. Well, I don't know. Given the current state of U.S. politics, I don't know how insane of a concept that is anymore. But he's got that fighting American spirit wrapped up in that classic, unironic, jingoistic American nationalist exceptionalism. He also has a really good character design. I love how Stephen Morgan draws him like Uncle Sam. It's very on the nose, but I think it's an effective caricature, having the President of the United States not only look exactly like a military propaganda figure, but also he's just big as shit, and he's imposing, and he's always got a stogie in his mouth, and he's constantly blowing smoke. Again, completely on the nose with visual commentary with about as much subtlety and nuance of a napalm enema, but it works. And President Goode's issue, his major malfunction throughout the series, is that America isn't what it once was. He wants to make America great again. And the best way to do that is by crushing the Soviet Union, who is the other major superpower, which threatens America's hold over the world. Because in a more globalized setting, he's witnessing the decline of the American empire, and the best way to put the US back on track, in his opinion, is with another massive doomsday weapon. And this is where we're introduced to Egon Teller in 6 Bill. Now, Egon is the book's foil to President Goode, and he's this former government mad scientist, as the book describes him as being, not entirely unlike the Iron Star. However, the big difference between them is that where Platonov fully embraces the myth of the great communist revolution of Mother Russia, Egon doesn't have that for the opposing myth of the great American dream. That's more so why Platonov is a mirror for President Goode. Egon, on the other hand, is just completely disillusioned with the concept of the American dream and what the United States has done in order to achieve that world domination, as well as his role in America's global atrocities, particularly Vietnam with 6 Bill. And 6 Bill is less of a character and more like a force of nature. He's basically what you get when you cross a T-800 with the Incredible Hulk. It's a schizophrenic killing machine designed originally to rival the Iron Star, but as Egon puts it, is ironically less destructive and impossible to control in any way. So he's effectively useless. In fact, when 6 Bill was first deployed, it was in Vietnam, which was a nightmare so horrific that the US government had to cover it up, and they just threw him away in a bottomless pit, locked the door, and threw away the key. And all these years later, President Goode thinks it's going to be a good idea to upgrade and deploy him in Afghanistan to fight the Iron Star.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Now, on the subject of 6 Bill, again, amazing character design, simple and effective. He's this hulking beast of muscle and flesh, and he's always naked and covered in blood. And it's just a man-made killing machine that looks like a Neanderthal. Again, on the nose, but effective. Now, that said, despite Egon's claims of 6 Bill not measuring up to Iron Star, that feels a bit inconsistent with what's shown in the book. In fact, there's a moment where Iron Star meets up with Revmir, who is this universe's Superman analog, who, by the way, another really interesting character who's in all of 5 panels, which I wish we got to see more of him, but, I digress. But he dresses Peter down and says that he knows that he's scared of 6 Bill because 6 Bill literally tore his heart from his chest, which shows a really interesting glimpse into the history of this world's version of the Cold War, using literal superpowered proxies to fight instead of actual troops in an all-out hot war. And I guess that brings me to my one major negative with the book. The world of 20th century men feels like a fully fleshed out universe with Warhammer levels of dense lore and history, and we're not given any context for it. It's the comic book equivalent of the flirty nip slip Like, come on, what are you doing? Just show me the goods. But the story's not about that. It's about the allegory and blah, 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 blah. Fine, whatever. But it's your fault for building an interesting world with an engaging narrative. And it just leaves me wanting more. Also, there's a lot here that's written to be intentionally vague that I don't really think needs to be vague. And I've read this a total of probably 4 times now, and I still feel like I'm missing stuff. You know, as much as those newspaper and magazine clippings from Watchmen are a bitch to read, they were really useful in fleshing out that world. And I feel like this book could have used something similar, but that's just me. Now, I do want to talk about the 4th major character here, that being Azra. And again, this is where I'm struggling with this book, because Azra is a really important character. And I still don't know what she is exactly, because she's an Afghan woman with a genius-level intellect, and she comes from a family of geniuses, but, like, is she a reporter? Is she a diplomat? Is she an academic? Like, I don't know what her role in society is, and maybe I missed something, and I'll get it on my 5th read, but she's a really important character because she is Peter's anima in Jungian terms. She is his feminine counterpart, and what makes her so interesting in that context is that she is a proud Afghan in the same way that Peter is a proud Russian and that President Goode is a proud American. And it's that nationalistic pride in her heritage that puts her at odds with Peter, because at the end of the day, much like the Americans, he's just another imperialist looking at her country and her countrymen as something lesser, something to be conquered in a larger game of political chess with the rival empire. And again, this comic really plays into that who watches the Watchmen concept, except unlike Watchmen, it's not critiquing the abstract in the deontological nature of the American superhero institution. Instead, it's more of a direct condemnation of imperialism, using superheroes as an allegory for economic and political power, and the authority both the American and Russian empires have taken upon themselves in subjecting other smaller nations around the world in their ongoing dick-measuring contests with one another since the end of World War II. And that's why so much of this book takes place in Afghanistan, because it's often said that Afghanistan was the USSR's Vietnam. You know, you have this massive imperial force beaten by a bunch of farmers who resisted conquest, but in that resistance, they suffered 1,000 times more than the invaders could ever possibly know, or realistically even care to fathom. And that's why, at the end of the day, I do feel like Azra was the heart of the book, which is kind of funny considering the whole heart motif with the Iron Star and how much of a Chekhov's gun that would be in the most literal sense by the end of the book, without getting into too many spoilers. But yeah, Azra wound up being a pretty major character, and I don't know, I just feel like more could have been done to flesh her out. But again, there's a few other characters you can say the same for, and I suppose that's my overall criticism with the book. That said, I feel like there's an intentional juxtaposition between the writing and the art, with Denise Camp's dialogue being lyrical and up to interpretation. Meanwhile, Stephen Morian's visuals are visceral and matter-of-fact. Morian is one of those artists where you can just tell what's being said even without there being dialogue on the page. Every page sort of just feels like you're looking at a tapestry, and again, nothing here is visually subtle. And the biggest thing that stood out to me was the respective designs of both the Iron Star and 6 Bill. These are 2 of the most advanced killing machines on the planet, and they're both designed like fucking cavemen. Bill literally looks like he walked out of one of those Geico caveman commercials, and he's always covered in blood, and he's always naked. Meanwhile, the Iron Star power suit is designed with these massive monkey arms that drag on the ground, and the suit moves like a giant gorilla. 2 of the most destructive forces of weapons engineering, and they are practically jumping around the battlefield like Neanderthals, because that is what war reduces us to. Also, can we talk about the lettering? Now, lettering is a thankless art in comics. It's one of those things where people usually only notice it when it's bad, but the lettering here, again, it's all part of that visual poetry. Aditya Bidikar builds an atmosphere with every scene depending on the types of fonts they use, or the color and style of the caption boxes. Everything just feels so intentional, and it really brings this whole comic together, I think. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about this book without spoiling it. If you like the Ultimates, both the original one and the current one, you're probably going to love this. If you like superhero deconstruction stories like Watchmen or Black Summer or JSA The Golden Age, you're probably going to want to have this on your bookshelf. But those are my thoughts. But what about you? Have you read 20th Century Men? Are you interested in reading 20th Century Men? Let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share, support the channel. And if you want to see more content like this, all you got to do is subscribe. I'm the Mystical Green Beanie. Thank you for watching, and as always, until next time, take care and happy reading.